All right, let's just jump right in with a pretty wild idea, one that kind of flips our whole understanding of how the world really changes. We tend to think that for anything big to happen, you need this massive movement, right? A huge wave of public support. But what if that's just not true? What if all the power, the real power, is actually held by a tiny, committed few? So, this whole idea kind of kicks off with this incredible statement from Albert Einstein. Get this. He said that if just 2% of the population took a firm personal stand against war, it would just end. Now, look, whether his math is spot on isn't really the point. The principle he's getting at, it's something we see again and again throughout history.
I mean, just look at that number, 2%. It's nothing. It feels impossibly small, right? So could it actually be true that the entire story of history doesn't really depend on the 98%, the vast majority, but on this tiny, almost invisible fraction of people? I mean, that's a pretty wild thought, and it's exactly what we're going to dig into. And there's actually a name for this group. It's called the creative minority. The best way to understand it is with this really cool metaphor. Think about baking bread. The creative minority, they're like the leaven, the yeast, in a giant lump of dough. In terms of sheer quantity, it's tiny. You can barely even see it. But what's its effect? It's total. It transforms the entire loaf. That's the idea here.
Okay, so I know what you're probably thinking right now. This whole 2% thing, it sounds a little off, doesn't it? Maybe a bit too idealistic. And honestly, that's a totally normal reaction. It's usually because we have a couple of huge mental blocks that get in the way of seeing how this actually works. So let's just tackle those head on. So, blinding factor number one, it's something we really cherish, especially in a democracy, this deep-seated faith in majority rule. I mean, it's baked into how we think, right? The will of the people is what counts. The majority is probably right. Their voice sets the course. But is that really how things play out? Yeah, the contrast here is pretty stark. On one hand, you have the idea of democracy, where the majority rules. But then you look at the reality of how politics often works, and it's a different story. The real influence, it so often comes from these passionate, organized minority groups who know exactly what they want and just go for it. And why does that work? Well, it's because while they're totally focused, the majority is often, well, just not that interested, or they're divided. A small group that really cares will almost always beat a large group that doesn't. Okay, on to the second big mental block. It's our obsession with bigness. You could almost call it jumboism. We just can't help it. We're instinctively impressed by big things. Big buildings, big companies, big armies, big bank accounts. We automatically think size equals power. But if you look at history, you'll see again and again that that is a huge, huge mistake. And this is the perfect example. Just think about this for a second. In one corner, you've got the Roman Empire, the absolute definition of big, colossal power, legions, laws, infrastructure across the entire known world. And in the other corner, you have one guy, Paul, in a prison cell. His only tools, some letters, and his ideas. I mean, at that moment in time, who would you bet on? One was everything, the other was nothing. But which one actually lasted? The empire is gone. But Paul's ideas, carried forward by a tiny group of people, literally reshaped the Western world. Okay, so now that we've kind of cleared away those two big misconceptions, our faith in the majority and our worship of bigness, we can start to see this principle pop up everywhere. Seriously, history is just packed with examples of these creative minorities completely changing the game. Let's look at a few of the most powerful ones. First up, the American Revolution. We have this picture in our heads of all 13 colonies rising up as one, right? A unanimous wave of revolutionary spirit. But that's really not how it happened. The truth is, it was driven by a small, smart, and incredibly dedicated minority. A lot of historians think there were probably more colonists loyal to the king, and even more who were just on the fence, just waiting to see who'd come out on top. The entire fate of a nation was decided by a small, passionate group. And you can really feel the weight of that struggle in this quote from John Adams. This isn't the voice of someone leading a massive, confident majority. No way. This is the voice of a man who knows firsthand the incredible cost and the pain it took for a small group to fight for a new future against absolutely staggering odds. Here's another example that's just staggering. The early Christians.
They were way, way less than 2% of the Roman Empire's population. They had no political power, they were actively persecuted, and yet, look at what this tiny group did. They helped stop practices like infanticide. They ended the horrific gladiatorial games, and eventually, their worldview completely replaced the old gods of the most powerful empire on the planet. I mean, think about that. So what was their mindset? How did they see themselves? Well, Paul had this incredible term for them, a colony of heaven. Now to us, that might sound a little strange, but people back then got it immediately. See, Rome used to plant small colonies of Roman citizens in conquered provinces to spread Roman culture and law, to be the leaven, basically. So Paul was making a powerful analogy. He was saying, we are a colony from another, better kingdom, and we've been planted here on earth to represent its values and to transform this world from the inside out. It's this idea of a small group with a massive world-changing mission.
And just in case you're thinking this is all ancient history, let's look at something much more recent. Think about one of the most dramatic showdowns of the 20th century, Gandhi and his followers standing up to the entire British Empire. I mean, one of the biggest empires in history. He had no army, no weapons. All he had was the moral power of an idea and the conviction of a committed minority. It's just such a powerful, vivid reminder that bigness isn't the same as strength. Real power lies in the ideas that own the future. All right, so the principle seems pretty solid, right? A small, creative minority really can change the world. Which, of course, leads to the big question. What on earth does that mean for us? For you and me, right here, right now, looking at all the problems in our own world? Well, when we're faced with a big social problem, people tend to react in one of three ways. First, you've got the people who are below average, let's say. They're the ones who just break the rules. Then you have the vast majority of us, the unaverage folks. We're honorable people, we play the game by the rules as they exist. But then there's that third group, the above average. These are the few who take a step back and ask a much deeper question. Hey, wait a minute. Are the rules of this game even fair to begin with? And this is the whole point of everything we've been talking about. Real progress, genuine change, it depends completely on that third group. Not on the people who break the rules, and not even on all the good people who follow them. It depends on that 2%, the ones who have the guts to question the whole system and imagine something better. They are the leaven. And that brings the question right to our doorstep, doesn't it? In our own lives, in our jobs, in our communities, where are we putting our brain power? Are we just dedicating ourselves to being really good at playing the game as it exists? Or are we trying to be part of that small group that's working to make the game itself more just for everyone? So in the end, we're all left with a pretty profound choice. Are we going to be the three measures of meal, the passive majority that just kind of sits there? Or are we going to be the leaven, the small, active, transformative minority? Because if history teaches us anything, it's that our answer to that question pretty much determines what the future will look like.